Welcome to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, Show 2. In our last episode, we reintroduced ourselves after a long hiatus from our old show. On today's show, we'll be talking about building your ideal lifestyle. Welcome to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, where we bring you real-life strategies on starting and growing a business and finding financial freedom without sacrificing the life you have with your loved ones. We are your hosts, Tom and Ariana Sylvester, and we are married, we're parents, and we're serial entrepreneurs. This podcast is for those who want more out of life. We'll show you how to take the vision you have and create the business that will help you achieve it. Join us as we share practical steps, real-life stories, and help you become a lifestyle builder.
All right, welcome back to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Woo!
I am Tom.
I'm Ariana, and we're your hosts of the Lifestyle Builders Podcast.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. You guys have probably noticed that the audio quality is a little bit better this time.
2 hours later, after messing with the mixer.
Yeah, I mean, we realized the first time there were a bunch of issues, and to be honest, I kind of feel like I was in the jailhouse this time.
The jailhouse?
Yeah, because we spent 2 hours with the mixer. I kind of felt a little like a hound dog.
What in the world is wrong with you?
So for those that don't know, Ariana likes to sing, but she also is likes a lot of different artists. And when she was younger, one of the artists that she really liked was Elvis, and she was obsessed with Elvis.
Yep. So where'd you find that little tidbit out? I was, in fact, slightly obsessed with Elvis in the 4th grade.
I don't even remember where I found that.
My parents probably told you.
Probably your parents. Your parents really like to embarrass you.
Interestingly enough, I went from being obsessed with Elvis to being obsessed with Michael Jackson. So figure that one out.
Well, to be honest, it's not embarrassing to be obsessed with either of those people because they're phenomenal.
They are. Classics. I was obsessed with the classics.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's bring it back. What are we actually talking about today? Because it's not Elvis. It's not Michael Jackson.
Yeah, so we're talking
the
about
random things that I was obsessed with in 4th grade.
Yeah, you were obsessed with a lot of random things.
Also whales, just so you know.
So what we're talking about today is really, I think, probably one of the most important topics that we end up talking about with people that often gets skipped. Mm-hmm. And it's really, figuring out what kind of life do you want to live?
Yeah. Yeah, it is the reason we chose this topic as our first topic on this new podcast after our introduction.
Yeah, and what we find oftentimes, and I mean, you guys heard our backstory on the first show, but we actually didn't do this the first time around.
Nope.
And what that ended up causing for us was a lot of misalignment, a lot of assumptions, and then it led to a lot of just hard conversations to try to figure out, like, okay, we're together. What do we want our lives to look like?
A lot of frustrations, I think, on both sides, because we both had very different ideas of what our lives were going to look like. Even though the end result was the same, we both had different paths of how we were going to get there. And obviously that can create a lot of discord in a relationship and in a marriage.
Well, I was going to say, and to your point, so it's when everything comes down to communication, but I think a level below that is expectations.
Yeah.
And when you don't sit down and talk about some of the expectations, like on where you want to be in the future, or to your point, how you're going to get there, you could be aligned on, we want to have this sort of a life.
Yep.
But if you think you're going to get there, or we're going to get there through a traditional path, and I'm over here thinking we're going to get there by being entrepreneurs, we're going to butt heads if we don't have those expectations come out.
Yeah. And I think that is ultimately what happened to us. I mean, we started off with our 5-year plan out of college. Well, actually in college still. We met freshman year, and people were already calling us the married couple. Obviously, their predictions came true. We did eventually graduate and get married, but that was part of the plan. It was we were gonna date throughout college. We were gonna graduate. We were gonna move in together. We were gonna get married. We were obviously find jobs first, then get married. Then we were gonna have kids. Like, we had this whole thing planned out, and we actually did stay pretty much on track with our 5-year plan.
Couple wrenches thrown in.
A couple wrenches, of course. What kind of life would that be if everything was perfectly following the plan? But we really worked hard to make all of those things happen as we had seen them. The problem came about when somewhere we stopped talking about the plan. And as you said, we started, I think, making those assumptions. So I had my own assumptions about what was going to happen afterwards, and you had yours, and they slowly started getting further and further away. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, do we want the same thing still? Well, I think so. But we have very, very different ideas of what steps come next to get to that.
Well, I was going to say, and we've talked about this before. What I found, and through us kind of reflecting afterwards, was like, for me, I kept talking about what I wanted to do, which was to start a business or whatever, instead of talking about why I wanted to do it. And it was once we talked about the why and kind of established that, then we could figure out the what or the how that we were actually going to make that happen.
Yeah. And I think for me, I just kind of thought things were just going to happen as they will, like normally, like everyone else's life. And I had never thought about there being an alternative path. So I don't think that thought ever crossed my mind. So I was perfectly happy just following the traditional path, because that's what you see. That's what everyone else does. So it's like, la, 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 this is life, and we're going to just keep going. And, you popping in with the let's start a business idea kind of just threw everything off track for me. And like a lot of others, when a wrench gets thrown into your plans, you immediately, it's like you react. So that put the plans off track for me. And I immediately was like, no, this can't happen. This is not what we planned on. This is not how it was supposed to go. So I immediately had those feelings of, whoa.
Okay, so with that, let's kind of guide people through the process that not only we use, but we share with our clients, and we've presented on, and it's really kind of evolved for us over the years, and we've tweaked it and made adjustments. But what we found, I think, going through this is that it really helps lay everything out so that you get aligned, and then it makes it easier to then take the next steps, whether it's starting a business or paying off debt or whatever the next steps are that you have to take to get to that ideal life.
Honestly, it all comes down to setting the foundation for yourself. So the very, very first step is sitting down with your spouse or significant other and actually thinking about and talking through what you want your life to look like. What is the vision that you have for, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? What is it that you want to be doing? How do you want to be spending your time? Are you working a job? Are you starting a business? Do you have kids and other family members? And just all of those things, like what is that? What is that picture? And then as you talk through that with your spouse, does that match up? Because if it doesn't, then obviously that's a little bit of a point of contention right there that you guys have to talk through and kind of compromise on some things maybe before you go to the next steps.
Yeah, well, and part of that too is like what we found was not everything has to match up. So we were aligned on a lot of things, but there might be some things that you want that are important to you that's okay.
Yep.
And I might be the same way.
Yeah, as long as those ideas all march forward in tandem and they all are aligned, and you can do all of those things together, and it's not going to throw off what your life vision is. Yeah, of course that makes sense. You want to do things as an individual along. You don't have to do every single thing with your spouse. I suggest against that. You might drive each other crazy.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, part of that is, what do we want together? What do we want our lives to look like? And then as individuals, what do we want to be able to do for ourselves? What do we want to allow our lives to look like for us? If you're parents, what do you want your life to look like for your kids? Just kind of thinking about all the aspects, almost like a little pie chart circle.
Well, I was going to say,
where each piece fits in together, even though they're a separate item.
Yeah. Well, and when we talk to people about this, like, they're like, okay, guys, that sounds great, but how do I do that? Like, I always see people like give me the deer in the headlights look, because it's like, I don't know. We're just kind of on our path and we're working our job. And so I think the vision board that we've kind of come up with works out well.
Yeah.
Because so you guys have probably heard of or seen vision boards before, but sometimes it's hard to focus in on what are the right things to really put on there. And so what we found was that we had 4 areas and then a 5th that kind of supports all those. So it starts off with really, what sort of things do you want to have?
Yeah.
And this is what most people think about, right? Like, I want to have more money. I want to have more success,
want a bigger
so that
house.
I can have
I want
Nice
a smaller
things.
house. Maybe you want to be a tiny house and traveling around the country. And maybe you want to move into a more minimalistic life. Maybe you've always had a tiny house and you want a humongous one.
Yeah. Well, so it starts with those things.
Yep.
And it's not bad to want things.
No.
It's just understanding what you want, and to your point, making sure that then aligns with everything else.
Yep.
Which then leads into the next thing.
It's experiences.
Yeah, and this is a big one. This is
Yeah.
really what we find a lot of people want.
Yes. Yep. I agree. I find more so there's a lot of people out there that things are nice, but when it comes down to what is the one thing you wish you could do more of, and it's always like the experiences. It's always, I want to spend more quality time with my family and my spouse. I want to take my family on vacation, or I want to take my spouse on more dates. Like, it's always coming back to the experiences piece of it.
Yeah, and it was funny. So I was actually watching a Gary Vaynerchuk video the other day, and I like some of what Gary says. I don't like other stuff, but he said one thing, which was a lot of people could actually leave their jobs, but they get obsessed with buying the things. And he's like, if you look at most people that are on that path, you could get rid of a couple of those things and then actually leave your job and have the experiences. And that's what a lot of people want.
Yep.
So, okay, so we got the things, we got the experiences. What we also find is that that's not enough.
Yeah. A lot of people need something more.
They're not happy even when they have the things and the experiences.
Yeah. And it comes down to ultimately making some kind of impact.
Yeah.
So I know that word brings a lot behind it, because when people hear impact, they think like impacting the world, but it really is impacting someone. So it could be on a small scale. It could just be impacting your family and your direct circle of friends and people that you care about. It could be on a slightly bigger level. Maybe you're impacting your community, or it could be on a larger level and you do want to go and impact the world in some way. But I feel like a lot of people have that inner motivation to, okay, I'm taking care of, my family's taken care of, I need to do something else. I want to feel like I'm not only helping myself, but I'm helping other people.
Well, I was going to say, and I think that's the key piece. So the first one is probably more about you. The experiences are maybe you and your family and your relationships, but the impact is more the selfless piece. And that's where I think a lot of us, what really makes us happy or feeling good is being able to help other people, being able to leave our mark, be positive.
Yeah. And I think part of that is the mentality shift too. You have to, everyone is out for themselves for the most part. It's hard to break out of that. Okay, I want to take care of myself. I want to take care of my people. But once you are on the track to do that, a lot of people then move immediately to the next step, which is I want to take care of other people as well, because I can do that now. And you'll see there are a lot of people out there that do own businesses, and they really don't make a lot of money, but everything that they make goes first to their family, and then they impact, their community or whatever, maybe they put out to a charity, or they start a nonprofit and they start to give back in that way. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are involved in some sort of impact.
Well, and that's a good point that you make, because some people have this fear or this mindset that they don't want to be greedy and they don't want to make all this money, and it actually limits their success. But when you tie in the impact piece, what you then realize is that you making more money isn't just for you to make more money. The more money you have, typically the bigger impact you can make.
Yep.
So then that leads into the fourth thing, which is things that you don't want to do. And a lot of people forget this. They think about all the things they want to do, but part of this is saying, well, I don't enjoy doing this, or I don't want to have to do this anymore. And that's part of what you get when you have success. So identifying what those things are then helps make sure that you're taking away so you have more space for the things that you want. I mean,
well, let's just lay it out there. The biggest one, people do not want to have to work a job.
Yeah.
So the majority of people out there, there's a lot of people who love their jobs, which is great, but they still struggle with the fact that they are completely reliant on someone else that controls their life, because, they have to go to their job, they have to listen to those people, their job controls their income and all of that. So even the people that love their job sometimes get frustrated in a job, but then you've got so many people who don't enjoy their job. So a lot of times the thing that you want to stop doing is either I want to stop hating my job, or I want to leave my job. So that's always a big one on that quadrant of the square.
Well, and what I found for people is it's not necessarily about having the job or not, but it's about having options. And most people get stuck when their only option is to have the job, and then things shift.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
And then finally, so those are like, what do you want your life to look like? And then we're big proponents of building a business that then supports and enables that life. So actually, we have a pretty epic blog post that details this whole thing.
Well, and I like you've added graphics into it too.
Correct.
So there's
that's what I was going to say. So we're talking through a lot of this, but if you guys head over to the show notes page at tomandariana.com/2, it'll redirect you and you'll have a link to that show or to that blog post. And part of what's on that blog post is a visual. So it'll help you guys kind of see what we're talking about. But the last thing there is then making sure that you describe what sort of business will then enable those 4 things for you.
Yes.
So part of that is saying, like, how big of a business do I need? Is it a business that I have to run from a certain location? How many hours do I got to spend on that? So it helps you just kind of think about.
Well, and how many years is it going to take me to get to the point I need to potentially leave my job?
Yep.
Because, a lot of people talk about, oh, start a business. And that's a great idea, but it could take you longer than you think.
Well, and that actually leads into our next point, right?
Yes,
so the first thing is talking about, your destination or your vision. And what I always talk about with people is it's kind of like GPS, right? So when you get in your car, and I love GPS, I don't know what I would do without
it. He's horrible at directions.
What does your GPS ask for? The destination, where do you want to go? Starting point, where are you at today? And then it's going to map out a course with some timing.
Yep.
And that's our next step after we have our vision and our goals, is to now say, okay, what's the time frame and what are those key steps in order to go from where we're at today to where we want to be with that ideal life?
Yeah. And I think I love that analogy, because so many people say, oh yeah, I have a vision board, but now I don't know what to do with it. Or, oh, I've set some goals for myself, but how do I figure out how those goals, like, how do I start working towards them now, today?
Yeah.
And so that's where we take that ultimate end result that you've put for yourself, your life's vision and the goals that come out of there, and you build yourself a roadmap. So you're
right along with GPS.
Right along with the GPS. You're following this roadmap that it's yours. You've created it. You are saying, here's the destination, here's where I want to go. And then you're taking those and breaking it down into actual things you can achieve. Because that's, I think, the hardest thing people have with goal planning is, very commonly, you do it once a year.
Yep.
And you just put them out there, and then they're there, and you don't ever look at them again until the next year. And then you're like, oh, well, crap, I didn't reach any of my goals.
And then you feel very depressed.
And then you feel depressed, and you're like, oh, goal planning doesn't work. This is horrible. So then you never do it again.
Yep.
And you're still not reaching your goals because you don't have any set out. So what we love about having a roadmap is you see the goals at the end, but you've taken those and you've chunked them out into, okay, if I want to get there 5 years from now, what are the things that I need to be doing? What are those milestone events? So then you take those and you kind of place them out on a timeline. And for us, we commonly like to use a 1-year timeline broken up into quarters, then 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. Now, don't freak out. I know that's really overwhelming. So if it's your first time doing a vision board and goal planning, just keep it simple. Don't try to do too much, because then you're going to get overwhelmed.
You can do just short, medium, and long.
Yes.
What are the short-term goals I have? What's midterm and what's long? Because, like, I know, like, for an example, one of our things was, we want to get into a bigger house. This house
How many times has that been moved on the map?
Yeah. Well, so this house we bought when we were single, like, we didn't have kids yet. Now we have 2 kids
and 2 pets.
Suddenly, things kind of expand when you have kids.
Children take over your house.
So for us, what we did was we laid this out and we said, okay, well, we both agree that we want a bigger house with more space. Where does that fit? Well, it seems like it kind of fits as like a midterm goal or maybe a couple years out. And then so as you start doing this, you start kind of laying everything out. And we used to do this on a giant wall. And what it helps you to see is, what does that path kind of look like? And are there periods where it's like, okay, we got a lot of stuff on our 1 year
Yep.
time frame. Are we really going to be able to do that? If not, what are some of the things that maybe shift out to 2 years? So it's not so much about the number of years, it's about sequencing things in the right order and making sure that it's what you want and it's what you as a couple want as well.
Well, and what I absolutely love about having a roadmap and using the GPS analogy is a lot of times people have their goals set and then bam, something happens. And like, oh, now it's going to ruin my entire plan. I'm not going to reach any of my goals. And the beautiful thing is they're your goals. So we obviously are parents and married, and we know life happens. So there are times when you may have had the perfect plan laid out and then life happens. So the beauty of it is you can go back and you can shift and adjust things on your roadmap based on what's happening in your life. And then you can look at those end goals and say, is this still what we really want? Or has whatever's changed in our life shifted that end goal? And do we need to kind of change that?
Well, I was going to say, and that's a lead into our third step, which is really having that process and having those check-in points. You know, like going back to GPS, part of the beauty of GPS is that it's constantly checking in and telling you when to adjust. You know, so like if you're going down the road and right now your GPS says, all right, in a quarter mile or in 1 mile, turn left. And then as you get closer, it keeps giving you notices. And when you miss it, it tells you right away. Now, if your GPS only updated every 30 minutes, you're going to miss the turn and then you're going to be very far off course. So one of the things that we've done is we've established different points throughout the year to check in so that we can kind of evaluate how we're doing and then make adjustments on a smaller scale that will then lead to actually achieving those goals.
Yep. Yeah. And the great part about this is we use those check-ins for everything. So we're not only checking on like, oh, how's the business doing? We're not just checking on our finances. We're not just checking on, okay, how we doing on that one goal? It's an entire big picture thing. So we use that time to obviously say, okay, we're supposed to be here. We're doing great. We're on track. But we also talk about what hasn't gone well. We talk about what has gone well, so we celebrate our wins. And then we talk about, like, is there something we want to change based on what we said hasn't gone well? So, great example, when our son was younger, he did not sleep well. And that is an understatement. He just never slept. He was very upset all the time. He was sick. He found out he ended up having a ton of ear infections. But one of the things at our meeting that I said wasn't going well was I'm exhausted because I wasn't getting any sleep. Tom was traveling at the time and I was home with both kids. I was supposed to be trying to take care of the two businesses while I was home, and it was just a mess. I was not happy. I was not sleeping. I felt like a zombie mom. So at that meeting, I literally broke into tears and was like, this isn't going well. I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm exhausted. So we talked through that and Tom said, well, what can we do to change that? And I said, I know it wasn't part of the plan, but can we maybe put him in daycare a little earlier than we had thought? So immediately after that, we looked at the finances. We looked at kind of how we had planned things out and said, yeah, I think we can. Let's adjust that so that we can fix this problem that's obviously causing a lot of other problems. And voila, we put him in daycare earlier than expected. I was able to get myself back a little bit and sleep and be productive with what I was trying to do in the office. And then he ended up being much happier anyways because he loves daycare.
Yeah.
He loves his teachers and he had friends and social. He had that social interaction. And it was just, it was better all around for everyone.
Well, it's a great example of just one, and that might even seem just like a small thing, but that could easily turn into a much bigger problem if we didn't have that conversation.
Correct.
Right? Because you're going to get more frustrated. I might not realize that you're frustrated. And then something that we handled on a small scale before it became a big issue could then blow up into disagreement or resentment or, frustration or depression. Like, those things, like that's where all the big problems come from, is that we don't catch things when they're smaller.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more detail, once again, in that blog post that
Tom
we
wrote you guys a book.
Oh, I mean, it's like 10,000 words. It's crazy. But this is so important that we want to make sure that everyone had these steps. But the basic format, whenever you do these check-ins, is, okay, let's reflect on our prior time period. what went well and what didn't go well, and then really focus in on from that, what couple changes can we make? Based on that, check in on your goals. Like, how are we doing? Are we on track? Do we need to make any adjustments? And then once you know that, then plan out your upcoming time period. So by doing that, you're constantly kind of seeing what went well and learn from those lessons, but then planning and making the adjustments in real time based on that.
Yeah. And it does so much from a communication standpoint. It might be awkward to get into, and I totally understand. Like, our first meetings were so awkward and just probably not as productive as they are now.
Well, if they're awkward, just sit down with a glass of wine and, it'll be a little less awkward as you get into it.
It takes a little bit of practice to get used to this. This is a thing that is not commonly done. It's not really taught for you to sit down with your spouse and, check in on your goals and vision and to talk about things that didn't go well. And it really, really helps. And whatever works for you. I know one of our members actually said him and his wife do a weekly review via video call at lunch.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, when you're taking care of the kids, you're at work all day, you got to get home and feed everybody, then you got to get everyone in bed. Then by the time you get to like you time with you and your spouse, you're exhausted. Your brain is not ready to be functional and talk about like serious things. So that's the worst time to be trying to talk about money and like long-term goals and where do we want to be in 5 years. So they actually sit down and they do their weekly review during lunch. And I was like, that's genius. And better yet, if it works for you, keep doing it. Don't let anyone say, oh, that's weird. You guys schedule time on your calendar to have a video call. No, if that's what works for you, do it.
Yeah, well, and this is the funny thing too, is that if it's important, you actually should be scheduling it. And like one of the biggest things we found was that consistency makes everything a lot easier, because when we know, like you talk about the weekly meeting, that's like the core, I think. Because it allows us to reflect on the week, plan out the week, and then it gives us time to connect. And especially with kids and with businesses, and if you have a job, you oftentimes end up putting yourself last. And like for us, actually, one of our things this year is we said we want to put ourselves first. And we've done pieces of that in the past, but we're literally putting ourselves first and making sure that we come first and that everything else supports that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, oh gosh, being married is hard. Being parents on top of being married is even harder.
Being
having
entrepreneur.
a job, having a business, like adding all of those complexities is one big ball of chaos.
Absolutely.
So the more clarity that you can bring into your life, the more scheduling and, setting aside time for things that you can do, the better off you're going to be with all of that. Same thing for your kids. Kids do best with routines. So just like school, a lot of times I'm like, why are the kids so nuts? Oh, probably because we've just let them do whatever they want all day. Maybe we should set some schedules and some routines and make sure that they're, getting used to this way of doing things.
Well, I was going to say routines and habit, because habits kind of tie into those routines, are so powerful. And, I think we've learned it as you left your job and then as I left my job. Part of having a job is you kind of get into this routine, right? You're getting up at the same time, your morning routine tends to be the same, and then your day is kind of structured. But when you go to leave a job and now you're an entrepreneur, you don't have that same routine. And at first you're like, freedom. But then afterwards you're like, okay, well, there actually is a lot of benefit to a routine. But the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you now get to set the routine. So I think a lot of people end up losing that, where they just kind of, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I think so.
You throw
the weirdest saying ever.
You throw the, you throw the routine away, but you don't realize that it wasn't the routine that was a problem. It was the fact that you didn't have the control over it.
Yeah, it's totally true. All right, so we have got some homework for you after hearing all of this. And if you have the ability to jump over the show notes page and check out Tom's epic blog post, I would love to kind of hear from you if you go back and do this. I want you to do the vision board exercise. I think that's the most important piece, and not just to do it by yourself, but to see if your spouse would come and do it with you, or even have you do separate ones and then come together and talk about them and say, okay, well, here's yours, here's mine. How do we merge them into one board? And just, yeah, that's my homework for you.
All right, sweet. And so my homework for you guys is actually something we didn't talk about, but it relates to the vision board. And it's really defining your ideal, what we're going to call every day. So you might have heard of activities out there where you define your ideal day and people are like, oh, well, I sleep until 10 and then I'm on the beach with a mimosa, getting a massage, listening to the dolphin. Like, I don't know. But they describe this day and it might be your ideal day, but it's kind of like Groundhog Day or some of those movies where if you live that every day, it wouldn't be as special.
Yeah.
And the reality is you can't live that every day, right? You got kids, you've got to pay bills. Like, so what we like to do is say, define your ideal every day. So a standard day, you wake up, what does it look like? And so by doing that, it then gives you a lot more realistic expectation of what to move towards. So my homework for you guys is Ariana's got you doing the vision board, which is great, but then follow that up and say, what do you want a standard day to look like that would just make you happy? And by starting out with those two things and then following up with the blog post and even the free video training that we have on here, it's going to really guide you guys and give you that solid foundation for your next steps and then being able to actually achieve that.
Yeah. So if you're not a reader, as Tom mentioned, we do have this series, all the things that we just talked about in the exercises, in a free video course training called Plan with Purpose. So that will obviously be on the blog post page itself, but we'll also include that on the show notes page at tomandariana.com/2.
Well, and I just want to jump in here too. So we intentionally gave this away for free.
Yes.
And actually, we were doing a training on this, and one of the guys that we were training said, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I just invested about $2,000 into a course, and the stuff you guys are giving away here for free is very similar to what this course does, and it's definitely on par with it. So, one of our big things is, the knowledge is free. It's all about implementing it. So realize, guys, that the value that we're giving you here, it works, and people pay a lot of money for it, and we're giving it to you for free, but you only benefit if you actually go and do the homework.
It's very true. It's very true. Implementation is the hardest piece, let's be honest. All right. So at the end of every show, we are going to introduce a fun little extra called Tom's Bookshelf.
I love it.
To give you some background behind this, if you haven't been following us on social media or if you haven't known us for very long, Tom reads a lot of books, also listens to a lot of audiobooks. And over the past, 10 or so years, he has amassed a huge collection of books that he has read.
Thousands. It's ridiculous.
We often play the game, try to guess a book that Tom hasn't read. But because of that, we thought it would be kind of cool. As we do each episode, Tom's going to recommend a book that kind of relates to everything that we've talked about. And if you're a reader or an audiobook listener, go out and pick up these little nuggets that Tom's handing out to you. So what do you got for us today?
Well, I was going to say, before I jump in, so that's a good point. So I read a lot of books. Like the books I have today, I've actually read physically, but then I also listen to a lot of books. And so using like Audible or something like that is great. And oftentimes I'll actually be reading a book and then I'll be listening to another book. And what I found is kind of a cool hack is that when you listen or read to a couple different books at a time, you actually start mixing the ideas together and coming up with new ones.
Oh God, that's just way too much. I'm a control freak, and there's no way that I could read and listen to different books at the same time.
But with that said, the key thing here is that pick how you like to learn, and these will be good resources for you. So my books for today, or my book, is going to be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
It's his favorite book, people.
And if you guys are watching the video, you'll see just how beat up and like yellowed the pages are on this. Yeah, stained. I got some coffee stains on there. But I have read this book, I can't tell you how many times.
And then what's
probably
this piece? Oh, the
once a year. Yeah, so this book is just foundational for how to be a good person. And it gives you just so many success habits. And one in particular is start with the end in mind. And a lot of what we're talking about on this show is thinking about where you want to be, thinking about the end, and then now you have a place to work towards. And if you're watching the video or if you're listening, I also highly recommend, there's a personal workbook that goes along with this. When you read the book or when you listen to it, there's a lot of good information, but it's sometimes hard to say, well, how do I take that and actually put it in my life? So what I found is that the workbook actually gives you a really good guide for that. So I'd recommend picking up both of those, and we will have them at the show notes page at tomandariana.com/2.
Yep, and we can also link to Audible for those of you that want to try out listening to books.
Yeah, and I believe actually Audible gives you a free
trial.
first book.
Oh, nice.
So if you haven't used Audible yet, head over to the page and you can get your first book free. And I know this book is on there because I've listened to it on there.
Of course you have. All right, you guys, it's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders.
And as we head out, I just want you guys to remember, it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Yes. Woo! Are you frustrated by a lack of momentum in your business? Do you want real-time guidance and support from seasoned entrepreneurs who really care about your results? If you're nodding your head or awkwardly shouting yes in public somewhere, then we invite you to join Lifestyle Builders, a mentorship program designed to meet you where you are and give you strategic and custom guidance so you can build the business you need for the life you crave. You can find out more at joinlifestylebuilders.com.
Your life, your business, your way. Join Family Entrepreneur Life. Join Family Entrepreneur